All right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. This is Gretchen Wall, coordinator of the Produce Safety Alliance. Welcome to our monthly Produce Safety Educators call. This one was rescheduled. We originally had scheduled this for July, so we had to move that a little bit and shift the dates around. So thanks for your patience and for joining us on this call today. So as with all of our other educators group webinars, all participants are muted. If you're logged in online, you actually have the ability to mute and unmute your own lines when we get around to question and answers. And if you are called in, I believe there is a function on your phone to be able to mute. I'm going to have to look that up. I think it's *3 or *4, but I'll have to look that up here in just one second. We may not get around to all the questions and comments, but you can always leave comments in the chat box and we'll be sure to get back to you via email or follow-up phone call. And we are recording this session, so if you check back on our website in a day or so, if you have to drop off the call, the whole session is recorded and we'll post and send the notes out a few days after the call. On today's call, we really wanted to focus on some of the things that have been happening lately. The first thing we'll talk about is our special session at the International Association for Food Protection meeting that happened in July. And then Betsy's going to talk about the newly released version 1.2 of the PSA grower training curriculum, as well as the launch of our Spanish website and the future Spanish lead trainer process. We'll talk more about that. And then we'll wrap things up with Donna talking about some of our additional projects and initiatives, including our online course, the OREI modules, advanced training, and mentoring opportunities. And I should clarify, Donna, the online training is going to be in Betsy's pile, not yours. Sorry, I should have moved that on the agenda. Didn't want to scare you. So we'll start with the IAFP special session that was hosted on Monday, July 22nd from 5:30 to 7 p.m. in Louisville. We had a really great turnout, so we appreciate all those who were able to join the session. Primarily, we talked about some of PSA's training progress and outreach activities. Dr. Samira Sar also gave a presentation about FDA's current activities with regard to education and outreach, and then Betsy wrapped up with some of the PSA goals moving forward. Happy to share those presentation slides with anybody if they're interested. It was not recorded. I know some of you are IAFP members and sessions are typically recorded and posted online, but this was a special sort of after-hours session, so you won't find that online, but I'm more than happy to send you the PowerPoints that we used during that presentation. In addition, we had a really fabulous panel discussion with members including Mr. Michael Botello from Massachusetts, Mrs. Kristen Esch from Michigan, and Ms. Teresa Lopez from Arizona, and they shared their experiences and perspectives regarding managing their state CAP programs. And we talked a lot about the state of the states and helping farms prepare for their implementation, and that was facilitated by Donna Clements. So thanks to everyone who was involved in that special session, and we hope to do more activities like this in the future where we know quite a few PSA trainers, lead trainers, and other educators are at regional meetings to provide our updates. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Betsy to talk more about version 1.2 of the curriculum.
Thanks, Gretchen. I kind of wanted to pause and see if anybody on the call was at that session, or I guess just let us know if you attended that session and you didn't think it was valuable. Just let us know what kind of information would be valuable, because we're constantly trying to keep people involved and aware of what we're doing. So I don't know if anybody has anything to add about that session. We certainly appreciate, I saw Kristen's on the call, but we certainly appreciated the collaboration we had from the states, but we're always open for more input if you guys have suggestions. So I guess I'll leave it at that unless somebody wants to unmute themselves and chime in. Okay, so hopefully you all are aware that we now have a version 1.2. This will be the third version of the curriculum, starting with 1.0, going to 1.1, and now to 1.2. It was released in July of 2019, so really just a month ago. the big things that you need to be aware of are that it includes updates from Subpart E in terms of the extension of compliance dates, you know, our typical keeping track of typographical errors and other organizational edits. We did, as you can tell from the cover, we did add a lot of new photos trying to up the diversity that's reflected and sort of give it a new look. People also had certain criticisms of some of our pictures, so we wanted to address those because they were good criticisms that we needed to address. So there have been those updates. There is a complete change log and summarized list of changes available. We are currently translated into version 1.2. That is almost done and will get trundled off to the printer. We are looking to have that in hand by October 31st, but the files will be, you know, available as soon as we get that done. Next slide. Can I advance these? No, I think that's on you, Gretchen. Okay. Version 1.1 use policies. You can still use version 1.1. But if you do, you have to include the list of things that are on this slide, right? So you have to present the slides that include the updates and FDA announcements regarding agricultural water. So you have to take those slides and put them into the PowerPoint to make sure they're presented. And you have to provide a handout of the slides and the notes to attendees so that they have a copy of the slides and the notes. It is also critically important that the trainers review the critical edit sheet so you guys know what has changed. So what big things we changed in 1.2 so you can incorporate those into 1.1 that you're presenting. Okay, if you're using 1.2, then you don't have to do these additional things because it's already incorporated in. But if you're using version 1.1 because you have a few extras left and you have some trainings coming up, that's what we'd like you to do. Next slide. Now, we found out our policy that was printed when we released 1.1 was that you could use version 1.0 until there was a new version. So when we released 1.1, we had a little note that said you can use version 1.0 until a new version came along. Okay, now there's a new version. We have become aware that people have stocks of these things. And so in trying to balance what people are doing, we are giving people till December 31st of this year to use up version 1.0s. Now, you're going to have 2 sets of edits there, which is why we would like to see 1.0s completely out of usage. And as of January 1, we don't want to see version 1.0 in use. So you have to present the slides that include those updates that we just talked about with 1.1. You have to provide that handout of those slides and those notes as well. Also, you need to review the critical edit sheet for delivering both of them, right? So they have to know what we changed from 1.1, 1.0 to 1.1, and 1.1 to 1.2. And it's best to use, obviously, 1.2 because the changes are there and it's easier to use it. But if you're trying to burn up those 1.0s, you're going to have to, as a presenter, be cognizant of all of these changes that have occurred. Okay? Are there any questions about that? All right, next slide. Thanks, Gretchen. As a reminder, just so we're all on the same page, if you are using version 1.0 or version 1.1 or version 1.2, your PowerPoints should match the printed manual. So if you're using a version 1.0 manual, use the version 1.0 slide sets with the additional stuff put in there to make sure they have the additional slide information. If you are having a training, make sure everybody in the training has the same manual. So if you have 10 version 1.1s, you can buy additional version 1.1s out of the bookstore to use up the rest of the 1.1s. but just make sure all the participants have the same version. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit of chaos in the room and people are going to feel that it's unfair. Again, right now, you should be using 1.1 or 1.2. As with the previous versions, when we release a new version, we are going to try and phase out the old version. And I know where we run into trouble with this is people have grant funding that they need to spend. So they tend to backlog the books. At this point, we have no intention of doing another version, but we can only react to the information that's coming out of FDA. And as they release new information or as they change, we feel like it's important to update the curriculum when it's something of consequence. So that's where we're at. We can't give you a time frame leading forward other than at this point, we're hopeful that V1.2 will be around for a while. Are there any questions about that? Okay, next slide. And I did say, before we get to this slide, I do just want to make it clear to everyone that the bookstore has version 1.1 if you need to round out any of those classes. You can still get version 1.1 in the bookstore. Just want to make sure I make that clear, as well as 1.2 now. All right, the other thing that was on my list to talk about today was our Spanish PSA website. And this has been launched. We're getting a lot of traffic on there. I happily talked to someone the other day who told me how useful it was, as English is not his first language, so he thought it was great that he could go and check out the Spanish website and get the information. So hopefully you guys can share this with any of your stakeholders or constituents that might find it useful. We are trying to make sure everything that's there, everything that's educational-wise on the English website is here. Some of the stuff we don't have control over if we didn't create the material, but where we're concerned and where PSA is involved, we're trying to make sure that this is up to date, as with our English site. Next slide. Okay, along with this website is really the first steps in a process of us developing a lead trainer review process in Spanish. So currently, we have been reviewing lead trainers who are predominant Spanish speakers with an English format, okay? So the application's in English, it gets translated, we have English reviewers, we have translators. So we have been reviewing lead trainer applications for those that speak Spanish. What we are looking to do is make that process entirely in Spanish so that the reviewers speak Spanish, the applicant speaks Spanish. It can be sort of a flawless system, again, to match the English system. It will be same as the English, a two-part process. So you attend the Train the Trainer, you fill out that application before you go to the Train the Trainer. We don't turn anybody away to attend the Train the Trainer. After the Train the Trainer, you apply to be a lead trainer through the supplemental application process, where you get an email, it has the questions in there, you answer the questions. This is obviously a pretty complex system because we have to have a duplicate database, we have to have duplicate questions, we also have to recruit and train reviewers who speak Spanish fluently, and go through all the translation of materials and questions and what have you. So we are in process. Again, the website was sort of the first step in that. We're now working on these other things. And most importantly for this group, we are looking for reviewers. So if you know lead trainers who are fluent in Spanish and you think they would be good at this, please get us their names so we can add them to the list. And we're trying to figure out that training process and trying to vet those candidates. So if you think you know of a really good candidate, please let us know. Next. Are there any questions on that before I move to the next thing? Okay, quiet group today. All right, the long-awaited PSA Grower Training online course. We've been working on this for a number of years, and I want to give you an update of where we're at with it and give you some examples of things that are in the course because we are getting very close.
Betsy,
Yep.
before you jump into that, one question did come in regarding the last part.
Okay.
So the question is there any effort being made to recruit Spanish-speaking farmers and or agricultural workers to be trainers, similar to how some states are using English-speaking farmers to provide multiple perspectives during trainings?
Okay, so we are not, the PSA is not actively going out and recruiting people to be trainers like that. Like, I think what you're asking is if we're encouraging them to attend the Train the Trainer to become trainers, is I think what the question is. I would say we as a team are not actively beating the bushes from that perspective, but we obviously would encourage that in the same way we encourage growers to become trainers in organizations where they have leadership capacities, because they do bring a lot to the trainings. Gretchen, I can't see the question because of my screen being not letting me bag out to a different view. So did that answer the question?
I think it answered the question, but this question came from an IAFP email address. So if that didn't answer your question or scratch the itch, feel free to unmute yourself. Somebody's saying thanks, so I think it did get to the question.
Good.
There was a follow-up question, which is a really good one. Is there a plan to host a Spanish language Train the Trainer course in the United States?
If there is interest, we can certainly do that. And that is actually very good. If you guys think that would be of interest, we can absolutely get that done.
And then this
okay,
next one.
That on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. This next one isn't directly related to Spanish training availability, but is about, the question is the English Train the Trainer manual available online in version 1.2? And I can answer this one. We haven't actually updated the Train the Trainer manual. We may be revisiting that soon to update some of our policies. We have updated some of the PowerPoint presentations that go along with the Train the Trainer. For example, the multi-day training, we've since updated some of that content, but we have not updated anything in the Train the Trainer manual, and we actually don't post that online. We only make the grower training manual available online.
Okay, any other questions?
Not that I see. I see a couple suggestions for potential Spanish lead trainer review committee members, so that's fantastic. Keep those coming my direction.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much for that. And thank you for the suggestion of the Spanish Train the Trainer. That we can absolutely do. All right. So the online version of the course, let's talk a little bit about that. Next slide. All right, so after the focus groups that Gretchen and I did around the country talking to growers, as well as a review of evaluations from the National GAPS program, we decided to make the format of the online course instructor-led. So how it will be is that it will be opened. It will be open for probably 3 weeks. There will be an instructor that goes with the course to help and to facilitate and to grade homeworks that are associated with the course. So it won't be on demand. It will be offered in blocks of time. And again, will be associated with an instructor. All of the produce safety rule curriculum requirements, as you know, because you guys train this, you have to show all the slides that are required, right? All of those slides are included in the curriculum, as well as additional resources, embedded videos, and other interactive elements to help people understand the information, to keep them engaged in an online format, and to keep that process happening. Because unlike a classroom where you're there, and if you're zoning out, the instructor can see your eyes and can know you're maybe confused and can say, hey, you look confused, what can I do? in an online course, we can't see the students. So all of these elements have been incorporated to help. And I'm going to show you some of those elements moving forward. Next slide. So as with the focus of the current curriculum, the learning assessments are geared towards those curriculum learning objectives. There's lots of ways to do that. There's built-in quizzes that are sort of self-graded that give you multiple choice matching, fill in the blank. There's some that require feedback, and you'll see in these required discussions, some of them are very intensive. There's also case studies to try and apply this information directly to things we have learned from the industry through outbreaks. So those teachable moments of this outbreak happened, this is why it happened, what do we learn about risk assessment, implementation of practices to reduce those risks. And again, this allows you to have those stories and the anecdotes that would typically be shared by an instructor, but they're just incorporated in the course. Last, there's these required discussions, and these can be very intensive. We are going to pilot this course to see how it goes, to make sure they work. We've already piloted one of the modules, but now that we have a bunch of these elements, we're going to pilot it again to see how it grows, see how it goes, and see if we need to modify anything. But again, they're designed to represent elements in a farm food safety plan, elements that help you assess risk to determine what practices might be valid for reducing those risks. And so it's all built on this idea of taking information and applying the information to figure out how to assess risks and put practices into place to reduce risks. Next slide. So this is a typical page to give you an idea of what you might see on a slide. You can see here, this is the information that is typically on a slide. The worker qualifications, workers and supervisors must be qualified to conduct their job duties through education, training, and experience. Now at the bottom of the slide, you'll see the provision symbol on the left, and you'll see what looks like a page with a magnifying glass on the right. This screen right here is the provision one. If you click on that, it tells you the regulatory provision. This is all in your books under the notes section, but for the online delivery, this is how it's set up. If you go ahead and click the notes with the little magnifying glass, you get this next thing, right? So this is telling you the level of education. So these are more of the notes. You can see the provision on above it that appears on the left-hand side, the right-hand side. These are the notes you would get. So we tried to break them out so that we don't have running pages. Some of the notes are very long. In some cases, we have put the notes on the slide in a click more button, so that it's presented in a way so that the learner doesn't have to be paging through pages of notes, because that's not very good for a learning perspective. Next slide. This is an example of one of the learning assessments or the internal quizzes. So here's the quiz instructions. They give you information. In 2016, strawberries from Egypt were contaminated with Hep A virus. It asks you a question about investigators went to the facility, saw the workers washing their hands. If you're washing your hands properly, how long should that be for? You can see if you answered until our hands are cold, that you'll get it's not correct. 20 seconds is the minimum. So it gives you the right answer, tells you which answer is not correct. So these are sort of obviously self-graded quizzes within the body of the course. And again, these learning assessments to help people understand what information is important, that issue of washing your hands for 20 seconds. Next slide. Here's an example of a case study. Again, it just gives you a short summary of what happened. At the bottom, the very last paragraph you'll see there, based on what you learned in Module 1, what do you think caused the strawberries to be contaminated? So we're asking people to apply the information they've learned, and then in this case, go into Module 2, where we focus on things like health and hygiene practices, sanitary facilities, and all of that. So they're built into the course in places where we think we can reinforce information that's been covered or introduce information that will be covered, or in this case, a little bit of both. Next slide. Now there's required discussions, and you're going to see on the next slide where it says that this course could take more time than the 7 hours that they commit to an in-person course, and that is true. You will see here there are, in this discussion topic, we ask people to talk about their farm. We also have to build in the possibility of a hypothetical farm, knowing that there are people that could take this course who may not actually be farm owners. Okay, so that's a key part. When you see that in the first part of the slide, we have to have the ability for people who are not farmers to take this course, so we build that in there. We're asking people to provide farm-specific information, asking them to think about their operation. We then ask them to identify hazards. What are things that are hazards in your farm? And again, in thinking about risk development, not every hazard is going to be a risk, but you got to think about which of the hazards can develop into risks. Okay, so we just ask them to apply this information and then describe a plan for how to reduce the risks once they have identified them. Next. Who is this intended to? I get a lot of questions about this. The online course could be for growers that have not been able to make it to a live training course. They could be for growers that need the information because they've delayed and there's no trainings near them. It's looking like the registration costs are going to be over $400. It's looking probably closer to $500. Why is that? It's instructor-led. It takes a lot of time to grade the course. It's also hosted through eCornell, and so we have to pay the hosting costs to have it there. So it will be expensive and labor-intensive. So I don't think it will compete with our in-person courses, but it does give people an option for taking the course. Based on the Good Agricultural Practices course we have, it is a little different, but I think the way it's currently designed, it will be very productive for the participants, and I think people will get a lot out of it. The course is complete. It is updated to meet version 1.2, so we had to go through and update it because it was done to 1.1. We are in the process of the FDA review right now. They have to go through all the engaged elements because they have not reviewed those, right? The online or the version 1.2 they've already reviewed, so that was pretty easy. We could put those slides in there. But they have to go through all of the elements of engagement, and there are a lot of them. We are hoping to have this done and be able to pilot the course in the fall of 2019 coming up, with the goal that we can launch it for real in 2020 and take students. And then all of the PSA team will teach it for a while, so we are comfortable with it. We understand what it is. Depending on the demand and how often we need to offer it, we may be reaching out to find additional paid instructors after the launch, depending on the demand. We do intend to offer this course in Spanish as well. So just so that's clear that we do intend to offer it in both languages. Well, both English and Spanish. There's more than 2 languages. Okay, I think that makes me done. Are there any questions about the online course? Nope. Okay, then I think Donna's up.
Yep. Betsy, you already asked everybody, you answered everybody's questions preemptively. So in the next couple of slides, this is Donna Clements with Produce Safety Alliance. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to highlight some of the resources that we're working on at Produce Safety Alliance, so I know sort of in addition to what Gretchen and Betsy have already talked about. So the first thing I wanted to highlight was the development of a couple of supplemental modules on soil amendments. And this is a project that we're working with in conjunction with the Organic Center and UC Davis. Those are the two big collaborators on this educational section, and there's a number of other collaborators across the country as well. And this is actually in conjunction with a USDA Organic Research and Education Initiative grant. So earlier, Gretchen mentioned OREI project. And for our section of this project, it is really focused on the development of two different modules. One is going to be on composting practices, and the second is on manure use. And in these modules, they also are going to have a pretty heavy soil health component as well. And the focus behind these is incorporating new research and information on soil amendment treatment and handling. And we're really focusing on sort of, because it's supplemental, it's going to be an add-on to the PSA grower training curriculum. So this is really focused for educators who maybe are looking for an additional subject to talk about in winter extension meetings, or maybe if you're working with targeted audiences, audiences who are using a lot of composting or manure practices, and they just want additional examples. Maybe you're using a multi-day grower training curriculum format, and you really want to focus that second day on soil amendment. So these are, as I mentioned, they are going to be adding in research and additional information. For example, the manure module is going to include some of that new OREI research, which is really focused on pathogen die-off in manure and incorporating that soil health component as well. And the compost module is going to be looking at more science. So we're pretty limited in Module 3 in the PSA grower training curriculum about how deep we can get into that information. So we're going to be talking about the science behind treatment. Why does it work? What are we looking for? Additional details, frequently asked questions, maturity and curing. We're going to sort of define what those are and to kind of go into some of those other details. Next. So in terms of these supplemental modules, I did mention that they're linked to this project. And they're also going to be really helpful, I think, for just continuing education. So I want to mention again that these are not a requirement. They are completely supplemental resources. Once they're finished, that will probably be sometime next year. Right now they're being developed. They're going to go through the pilot stage. They will eventually be publicly available on the PSA website. And we are also going to be targeting a couple of PSA educators calls in the future, probably next year sometime, spring or summer. And we are also working with the Organic Center to get these modules out to a different audience, really focusing on, I'll say, those growers who are using soil amendments currently. And the reason we're highlighting these here is these are just one example of potential supplemental resources. As you guys hopefully know, as educators, we have a teaching activities section of the website that we're sort of trying to constantly populate, and I know there's a couple of other resources under review, some of which are soil amendment based. Any questions there? I see Dave poked in with a comment that he's excited. Okay, so next. So in addition to these supplemental modules and the development of additional teaching resources, we are also working with the Southern Center to host some PSA Advanced Trainer Workshops. And the graphic here you see is the save the date. And I believe this is going to be going out in the PSA newsletter pretty shortly this week. And essentially what this is the Southern Center has really been pushing this project forward. And this is intended to be a 3-day program. So you'll see there are 2 dates listed. One is going to be the pilot, so I think that December date is going to have a lot of instructors, maybe fewer attendees, and we're really trying to pilot this program. So we're going to pilot the agenda, see what feedback we have, and then they already added on that January date to sort of target the southern region. I want to point out that we are hoping to roll these trainings out regionally, so we're going to see how the southeast one goes, and then we are going to work on kind of rolling these out. And you'll see that it is a 3-day program. So this is targeting that advanced knowledge. It is going to be very workshop-based. So as we've had planning meetings with the Southern Center, we're really focusing on hands-on elements. So how do you do post-harvest quality monitoring? How do you actually turn a soil amendment? Things like that. And I'm really excited about it. I think most people are. And there's a lot of collaborators working on this. I think there's usually 20 or so people on the call. So I think it'll be really fun once it does roll out. And I know Caitlin's information is there if you have any questions, but I'll also say you can probably reach out to anybody, Michelle Danila, Caitlin, any of the PSA folks if you have more questions. Next. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight at the end of this call is some of the mentoring opportunities that we have at PSA and with a number of our collaborators. So I do want to highlight that there is a need for this continuing education, continuing training, and I think that links in with the workshops that I was just talking about. One of the common deficiencies that we see on lead trainer applications when we review them is having applicants who do not have a lot of training experience. So one of the things that we try to do at PSA is we try to stay available and open. So if you are considering applying to be a lead trainer, feel free to contact one of us at PSA and we can try to either connect you with somebody or co-train with you to help you get some of that training experience. And I'll mention here that on the PSA website, we do have a public directory. So say you're looking for somebody in your state or in your region to maybe reach out to or to collaborate with, that's how I usually use the directory, is to find names and find contacts in my region. The other thing I want to mention here is that we are working to build capacity regionally through a number of sort of different networks. So we're working with the regional centers. I just highlighted one of those partnerships with the Southern Centers. We are working with professional associations such as IAFP to help build capacity, local partnerships, as well as international coaching activities. So again, I think the main message I want to leave here is if you have questions, maybe it's technical assistance, you need to sort of ramp up your training experience a little bit, feel free to reach out to anybody at PSA and we'll try to work with you to get that experience. And I also want to mention, I think Gretchen mentioned something about the Advanced Trainer Workshops. I should say, I did not mention this earlier, that it is a requirement that every participant has attended a PSA Train the Trainer course. And the reason is that we're going to be building on the information and produce safety rule requirements that we discuss at the Train the Trainer course. So it's an advanced course, so there is that prerequisite of having attended the Train the Trainer. And next, I think that's all that I have, Gretchen.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Donna, for that information, and Betsy as well for sharing that info. There was a couple good questions and comments that came in while Donna was presenting. One was going back to the discussion about the online course, and the question was related to whether participants who enroll in the online course receive a printed manual, and the answer is yes. That is a requirement of the online course. We want them to have the physical manual in hand with the notes that they can scribble on and take with them even after the course concludes. So that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Betsy, I believe that is already built into the course fees to have a physical printed manual. Yep,
and they will be eligible for an AFTO certificate as well.
That was the second part that I wanted to mention, was as long as the participant completes all of the activities and completes the full course, then they'll be eligible for the same AFTO certificate. Okay, at this point, I'd like to open it up to any questions or discussion from the group, and I did look it up. It's, if you are called in only on your phone, it's *6 to mute and unmute your line. Otherwise, if you are logged in on the Zoom online interface, you can mute and unmute your own line. So I'll pause here and see if anybody has any questions. I see that Kristen's also sharing some information about videos and presentations that MSU Extension and MDARD worked on, and she linked directly to those regarding soil amendments. Thank you, Kristen, for sharing that with everybody. And I'll put those in the notes as well for those of you who are called in and can't see the chat box right now.
Is there anything that you guys think we should be working on, or anything else that's a concern? I mean, we presented stuff today just to give you updates of where we're at on a couple of projects we're working with, but always happy to take questions or comments outside of what we discussed today. All right, how's it going out there? Is training going okay? Anything we need to know there?
Hey, Betsy, this is Travis. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I have a question about the online training.
Mm-hmm.
Will there be any effort to share with other PSA trainers in different areas as far as kind of the attendance of those courses and where people might be coming from? For example, would you have any way of letting us know if folks from Florida are taking those courses, so we kind of can estimate the demand here?
Oh, that's a great question. So are you looking for names, or are you just looking for volume?
Just volume.
Yeah, we can certainly, that's a good thing to ask at this point, so we can figure out what would be the process for reporting that.
Yeah, Betsy, Michelle, following up, volume and like number of unique operations. So if it's like 40 people, are they 40 people from one farm, or are they 40 people from 40 different operations?
Okay. Yeah, I think Rob and Gretchen are probably currently having heart attacks with me saying this. We can talk about doing that. I think we should be able to do that. We'll just have to figure out how to do it and how to report, you know what I mean? How to report it.
Yeah, I don't think the volume should be a challenge. I think the unique operations may be a bit challenging just because that information is entered in. Sometimes the person might say, oh, I work for Smith Farms Incorporated, and then the person sitting next to them says, I work for Smith Farms. So it's hard for us to link that it's the same operation. I guess we could deduce that from addresses. It's just kind of time consuming, but we can definitely consider that.
Yeah, I think the other thing is we should think about the reporting frequency. I mean, right now we do other stuff quarterly, so, but that's good to put on our radar so that we can talk about it and figure it out.
This is Kara from the National Young Farmers Coalition. I also wonder if it would be helpful to just have zip codes in part of that reporting, so we know if there are areas that maybe are getting underreached by regular workshops.
I see what you're saying, yeah. Another good point. Anything else related to that we should consider when we're trying to think about that? At least some of my experience with the GAPS course, I've had guys sign up for the online course right when we were training in their backyard, and some of them are just like, I can't get away, I'd rather do it at night. You know what I mean? So sometimes it has nothing to do with availability near them, it has to do with their scheduling. But I think that is a good point to see if there are areas that aren't being reached.
And Betsy, I'll just follow up on this, and this is Michelle Daniluk with another question. So I'm assuming then that PSA will be teaching all the online courses. It's not like they're going to allow anyone anywhere else to teach an online course.
Do you mean teach your own online course, or do you mean teach this course?
Either.
Teaching this course, I suspect depending on demand, if this course has a lot of demand, we will be asking for people to help teach it. That I can guarantee you. when we were having the discussion of to be instructor-led or not instructor-led, PSA team is, some of them are on the call. They can reinforce this. One of the big concerns was teaching these courses is very labor intensive. And they were very worried that the need and the demand would outstrip our abilities internally. So Gretchen, you want to mention that? Because I know you were a solid voice in that camp.
In which camp was that?
The camp of, oh my God, are we going to have time to teach all these courses if there's a lot of demand?
Yeah, I mean, that was my concern.
Yeah. So the deal is if it comes down to, and there's high demand, we absolutely will be looking for other instructors, especially people like you, because I know you have a lot of time and what you're looking for is more work.
I have all the time.
Exactly. But we will be looking for more people to teach this. In terms of whether or not you can develop your own online course, I am not going to wade into that water at all, because I think that falls under the FDA equivalent course thing. Does that answer the question?
I think so, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, there's a comment that someone just submitted here regarding identifying participants. Another option might be to send links to the online participants to connect them with local resources for further information. For example, connecting Iowa participants with the team at Iowa State. Otherwise, we might miss out on that connection and the opportunity for outreach. I think that's definitely a great suggestion.
Right. And I think I can check, but I'm pretty sure that's woven into the course in the sense of talking about the regional centers and talking about that kind of stuff. So we absolutely are trying to drive people to the resources that are near them.
I have another question that came in here about who is teaching the online course, and is that person a lead trainer or a trainer? The people teaching the online course will be at minimum lead trainers, if not trainers of trainers. Obviously, the PSA team, we're all trainers of trainers, but we may contract with other individuals who are lead trainers to deliver the course. So it has similar same policy as hosting a grower training in person. Must have at least a lead trainer.
Right. I also should say that when we pilot it, again, using the GAPS online course as an example, participants will oftentimes wait until the last week to do all their homeworks, and then the person who's teaching the course gets stuck with those elements all at the end. This course has way more elements than the GAPS course, and so we're talking about benchmarking and other things to try and make it an engaged course the whole way along so that people don't wait till the very end. But yeah, there's a lot of things under discussion, but in terms of who can teach it, it has to be at least a lead trainer because it is a grower training course. And as I said, depending on demand, we will be reaching out for other instructors.
Got another interesting question, and this one is related to trainers accessing the online course. So it's, will trainers be able to view this course or use it as a practice tool for in-person trainings?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't think we had considered that one before.
No, we hadn't. One of the things we have considered, and one of the things that we did talk about, was all of these new elements that we've created. Allowing people, sharing those elements, because we've spent a lot of time in the development of the elements, and I believe we decided that would be perfectly fine to share those elements. So I think that might be something that trainers are interested in, and how we're gonna post those elements and share. I'm not sure.
You say elements, Betsy. Are you meaning like the case studies and the questions,
Yep.
the engagement questions?
Yep. I mean, the quizzes, some of the quizzes are really nice. So if you're using clickers, I know we have the clicker questions that are in the queue to release, but some of those would be good for in-person, like little quizzes and stuff that people might find really helpful. And So I know we talked about it, but we didn't really discuss how we're going to do that. So that should go on the list to actually, once it's approved, share those so that we know that, that they're solid.
Mm-hmm.
That's very good to bring that up.
Okay, any other questions? Because if not, I'll give you a few minutes of your afternoon back. But before we wrap things up, I just wanted to share that we will be having a meeting next month. It'll likely be in late September, and the focus, to Dave Ingram's pleasure, is Module 3 soil amendments. So we're going to have 2 presenters on the call delivering Module 3 to the audience, just as an opportunity for trainers and lead trainers to hear somebody else present it, because there's always interesting stories that come from different trainers' methods of delivery. We just haven't selected a date and time yet, but it will most definitely be after there's a North Central soil amendments a workshop in early September. So it's going to be after that, because we want to incorporate some of the key learnings from that into this presentation. So look for a notice about the scheduling of that for late September. And as always, if you have other suggestions for topics that you'd like us to cover, I saw one come in from Kara via my email just a few minutes ago. Please do send them on to me, because we want to tailor this content to what's most useful for the group. So just shoot me an email if there's a specific topic area or module or content or even speaker that we can invite for the group. So again, keep an eye out for a late September meeting invite. And I also want to mention that I always post on our website the login information. So if you happen to miss the email or lose the email and you're wondering when the next meeting is going to be, it's always posted on our website, and it's under resources, and then you drop down to Produce Safety Educators Call. And I did see a question come in. Hold on one second. So this is a follow-up on the Spanish language Train the Trainer. And the statement is, I'd wonder if it'd be possible to more formally assess demand across the states in addition to putting out a request via this call. We'd only have a couple of participants interested in Minnesota, but for the sake and access of increasing the pool of Spanish-speaking farmer trainers available in the U.S., it seems key to have one in the U.S. versus asking folks to potentially go to Mexico. Thanks for considering.
Yeah, well, I think to that point, I think if we find out that what we need to do is have one in every region just to sort of cover our bases, I don't think that's unreasonable. So I think, let us know if you think you have a handful of people. We could always run it as an integrated, which might make it a little bit more possible in some areas. We try to have a minimum of 15 people attend Train the Trainers, so we want to, make it worth the time. But we haven't really put effort into doing U.S.-based Spanish Train the Trainers. I know we have had them in the past, but if this is coming up as something we really need to get on, we can make that happen. So I appreciate the input, and just let us know where you're at and where your interest is, and then we will work to get those on the calendar.
And that is something too that we might bring up for those of you who are PSA trainers or lead trainers. We will be having a call on, missing my calendar right now.
October 16th.
Right, it's Donna's birthday, that's right. Our annual PSA Trainers Update webinar is going to be at 2 p.m. on October 16th. So that might be a place that we also can poll for interest in a Spanish Train the Trainer course. But I also wanted to mention it here. We're going to cover many of the same updates that we did today, but probably go into a little more depth about our future plans. So stay tuned for more information about that if you're a PSA trainer or a lead trainer. And the registration is available for that meeting. I'll put that in the notes as well. Any other questions, comments?
I would just say I'm looking at the number of people that are on the call, and we really appreciate you guys taking the time to join us and all the thoughtful suggestions and putting things on our radar. That it's we're happy to do things if we know you need them. So that's only possible by you guys taking time to be on these calls and taking time out of your very busy schedules. So I do just want to say thank you for being on these calls and participating and sharing your ideas and your thoughts. It allows us to, do what we need to do.
Yep. With that, I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the call for the day, but keep an eye out. I'll be sending out some notes. I'll post this recording on our website shortly, and we'll hopefully be talking to you in late September when we send out the announcement regarding Module 3 for this next educators call. Hope you guys all have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Gretchen, for all the organization.